Howdy, folks. Happy Tuesday. We're back. We have things to talk about the NHL and the playoff race. And I'm sure when that gets on the show, we'll be arguing about the validity of the Philadelphia Flyers and Edmonton Oilers playoff chances. But we'll start with some pre-show stuff, Russ.
Yeah, so Anthony Barr, a linebacker from the Minnesota Vikings, he came to a verbal agreement with the New York Jets for $14 million a year, which was on probably the cusp of maybe being too much money for what he's worth. But again, Jets have to overpay a little bit to get players to play for him right now. And so they did that. And about 2 hours ago, he rescinded that deal and re-signed with the Minnesota Vikings for $13.5 million. Now, what I really don't like is the way the NFL does this. They have their official tampering period, and players agree to deals, and then the next day they get to change their mind because because the other team finds out via the media what their guy has been offered and decides, you know what, with all this sort of cap maneuvering, we can come close to it. We'll give you this, and then the guy stays. That whole thing's got to stop.
Which is an oxymoron, like official tampering. It's like jumbo shrimp. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
But this is okay. This is how ridiculous and sordid the NFL is. A wide receiver who played for Carolina, Devin Funchess, signs a 1-year contract with the Indianapolis Colts. Funchess has done essentially nothing in his career, not much. Okay. And on a 1-year deal, he is making more than Connor McDavid. He's making $13 million. So put it in perspective here. I mean, I understand the NFL is multi-billion a year and the NHL doesn't make as much. But the NFL has a hard cap basically.
Yeah.
And so does the NHL. And by the way, number 2, maybe number 3 wide receiver who played with Cam Newton and didn't do much in his career, he's making more than the best and highest paid player in the NHL. That's why I have begun to really hate the NFL, because it rewards players who are nothing or close to nothing with money that's ridiculous.
Well, they used to do that with quarterbacks, and then they finally got rid of the slotting, and that was smart because they were paying guys that weren't worth it, like Ryan Leaf and so on. But this situation's bad because we don't see this in any other sport where guys come to verbal agreements and then they're like, oh, you know what? Funny thing, I got this last-minute offer. I'm going to go with that. And we don't really see that. But with the NFL, we see it more often than not. And more often than not, it's a rebuilding team like the Jets or something where a player decides, you know what? My other team finally blinked. They came close, so I'm going to go with them. Well, it's really a dangerous way to sort of play your free market system, even though the NFL is really not a free market system.
Well, let me ask you, because I know that the Jets are in on Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah.
And I'm praying because
I'd rather be in on the Liberty Bell, but that's me.
There was a report out there from an ESPN reporter, I think it was Josina Anderson, who listed like 5 or 6 teams, and one of them was the Bills. And it's like, okay, how many old, and I'm not saying Le'Veon Bell's old, but how many old running backs can you collect? And it's like they already signed Frank Gore. I'm waiting for them to sign Thurman Thomas and O.J. Simpson and Franco Harris. But the last player I want the Bills to sign is Le'Veon Bell, because they need to throw the ball to win. And are you because you're a Jet fan, are you pro Le'Veon Bell or are you anti?
No, I'm anti, but I know what'll happen. The same thing that sort of happened with Santonio Holmes. A lot of these guys come from Pittsburgh. Now, I'm going to give the exception was Alan Faneca. He was just A+ the whole time. And he just walked away at the height of his game and was just like, you know what, I'm done. I appreciated that guy because he was great, and there was no shenanigans. All these other guys that come from Pittsburgh, when Pittsburgh gets rid of them for shenanigans, are all great players because Pittsburgh knows how to draft, right? And they know how to develop. So Like Santonio Holmes was really good until he wasn't, and then all of a sudden he becomes a problem. Bell will probably be really good for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden something will happen, and the pressure of New York, whatever, he'll start mouthing off, and he'll be like Geno Smith in the locker room. And at the end of the day, you don't want that. But again, the NFL is just so full of these guys that it's a shame for the good guys, because I like interviewing the good guys, and I don't want to say there aren't any, because there's a ton. But it's these other guys that get all the press, that get all the money, and it's like the good guys that do their job, like the Jets signed C.J. Mosley, right? If people go on my Twitter feed or YouTube, go to Sportsology's YouTube, I did an interview with C.J. Mosley because his wife is on a reality show. He's a cool guy. I really liked him even when he was on the Ravens. Now he's on the Jets. He didn't rescind his contract. Like these guys, they feel like nobody's going to offer them anything, so they go to a team, a lower level team, right, that has a lot of money like the Jets, and they get a big offer, and then they go ahead and they sort of shop it around town. They do that in Major League Baseball too, but they don't make verbal agreements when they do it. You know what I mean? Bryce Harper didn't make a verbal agreement to anybody and then sign with the Phillies. So this is a different thing, and I think really Goodell should do something about this. It's bad.
And I won't call the Jets football Siberia like a well-known and actually a guy I like listening to on the radio and on TV, Don LaGreca, who covers the Jets and covers the Rangers too. He referred to Buffalo
and a HockeyBuzz fan, Don LaGreca, by the way.
No, he's a great guy. I actually met him last year at the home opener for the Leafs when they played the Rangers. But he referred to Buffalo as football Siberia, and I'm like, okay, do you remember that the Jets were worse than the Bills this year?
Yeah, the market's not Siberia, and Buffalo isn't either. Football Siberia really, if it were
Cleveland.
Well, no, Jacksonville. Jacksonville, and Nick Foles just signed there for way more than he's worth. I think he's getting 20-something million a year. Now, he did win a Super Bowl. I get it. But again, this NFL is so rich that other Super Bowl winners that weren't that good, like Trent Dilfer, he'd be making $25 million. Like, it's just silly.
A bad quarterback makes 15 to 25.
You got to remember about the thing that drives the NFL so much. You know what their salary cap is? It's over twice what the NHL's is.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like it's nuts. They actually get enough TV revenue just from the revenue sharing that covers something like 3/4 of the salary cap, like per team, like just off their national contracts through the NFL. That's what's driving it. Is there's so much freaking money. And there is and it has 50% of it has to go back to players anyway. So they just rather spend it because they make so much. It's a completely different economic model. Like the two leagues are completely incomparable. It's just like you can't compare baseball.
Right.
But what I think is interesting about baseball, Russ, and you know this better than anyone, is there's a lot more proceed with caution going on in baseball. And these guys aren't jumping the gun to agree to it tomorrow morning at noon or whatever it is.
Oh, if you're calling that,
right, like there's a bit of a different trend going.
It's a collusionary caution.
Yeah, and the range.
That's a good name for a book.
The range in baseball, since they have a luxury tax and not a cap, the range in terms of salary, the Bostons, the LAs, and the New Yorks spend more than NFL teams. And teams like Kansas City and Pittsburgh spend less than the cap floor in the NHL. That's the wide divergence.
But I'll tell you what's going on in baseball, though. I did just post it on a website called fungosports.com. They are going to have a strike in 2021. It's coming because we talked about Blake Snell yesterday. Alex Bregman, who's a star shortstop for the Astros, he's a second-year player. His first year, he was about 19 homers, 80 RBIs. So last year, he goes out and hits 33 homers, has 103 RBIs, and 51 doubles. He gets a $41,000 raise. $41,000 in baseball is like $12 to a regular person getting a raise at their job.
Last thing, Bryce Harper making $25 million with his signing with the Phillies.
Yeah, I tweeted about that with the I tweeted that's like the floor of the post lockout NHL salary.
Yeah.
Most,
Unfair.
and most people believe Aaron Judge is close to or maybe as good as Harper, but because he's only in his third year.
Well, not enough time served.
Right. He's making $700,000.
Yep.
I'll take 700. Believe me, I would take $700,000. But if I see Bryce Harper or I see Jacoby Ellsbury, who hasn't been healthy in 2 years, making $25 million, I'm like, let's friggin' strike now because this is ridiculous.
And you've got Ashkin Slaughter in your knee. Nobody wants you.
Right.
And 700,000 would be a big price cut from what you're getting on HockeyBuzz, so you shouldn't do that.
If you put Mike in right field, he's hurt the next inning. We know this already.
Hey, I played softball and I pulled one quad in one inning, went into the outfield and pulled the other quad.
It's the greatest story ever.
I can remember once
That's amazing.
catching, like on TSN here, a men's softball broadcast off of ESPN. They're someplace nice with palm trees, and all it was like 285-pound hulking men. And it's a slow pitch. They lob the ball up and they swing with every iota of strength they have. And when they miss, it is spectacular.
Right.
It's like something out of a Bugs Bunny cartoon.
Right.
It's
Well,
like
you still play in one of these kind of leagues, don't you, Russ?
I did. I stopped. This was about 4 years ago.
I thought you still played like really
Do
recently.
they have PED testing?
No, but listen,
They
3 or 4
should.
years ago, I did play in one of these leagues, and we played it for a couple of years, and it was played up at Merck, and Merck is a pharmaceutical company. We would play, and all these guys would look completely steroided out. We had a team of normal guys. I'm playing third base, and these guys could literally hit it to the solar system to me if they wanted to. So, but what would happen with these guys is if you hit
enough dialysis, and you can hit the ball really well. You know that.
true. If you hit more than 3 homers in an
You only
inning,
need a bat.
if you hit more than 3 homers in an inning, you're out of the inning. And then if they did it more than a couple of innings in a row, then it started to be outs. So, so these guys were so undisciplined that it would come time they would hit the 4th homer and it would be an out because they didn't know how to just hit a base hit or hit a regular fly ball. It was a home run or nothing. And some of these guys were ridiculous. So we did have to get out of that league because they were just – if you're going to take performance enhancers to play softball, something is wrong with you.
The thing that makes my story even more funny about me pulling both quads is that was probably the first game I ever stretched before the game.
Oh man, yeah,
Okay,
I never stretched for a game.
Let's
Those are myths. Those are myths. The whole stretching thing.
No, you have to stretch.
You have to stretch,
No,
and
I
I
know.
never did, and then I stretched and I
As a
pulled
soccer player, you know.
I stretched before the hockey game, so I know. I do. All right, let's get started, shall we? Because I'm going to prove to you today why the Edmonton Oilers are going to make the playoffs.
All right.
I spent a lot of time on this, and Peter, we talked about this last week. So,
yeah.
All right, so.
Oh, I didn't realize you were doing it.
Well,
Because
you guys don't have to.
so
I'm going to give you a really shortened version of it because
I'll do mine right now. That's how long it'll take.
Well,
Okay, go
let's
ahead.
see
Go ahead
the
because I went
No,
through.
you do yours. I'll do mine.
Okay, you got that. All right, here we go. Ready?
Yes.
By the way, I did change 2 things back there if you're looking for interest. Hello, Hockey World. It is Tuesday, March 12th, 2019.
I am math genius Michael Agello.
I am Peter No Pulled Quad Testier.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Eklund. My patch just fell off my thing. I was jokingly putting this up there. I think this kind of looks cool, doesn't it? Be a cool shirt. And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in the comings and goings in the hockey world. And last night, kids, before we get into the Oilers, hold the red phone. I got the bat phone right here.
Mm-hmm.
Flyers are 3 points out of a playoff spot. And we're all sitting there saying there's no way in hell they can make it, right?
They're not making it.
No, you said 91
No way in
points.
hell.
It was 91 points.
I know, but they're 3 points out.
No way in hell.
All right. Okay. All right. So we're having fun with this. So yeah, the Oilers playoff theory. Ready for this, Toronto Greenhouse in the chat room that's just laughing at me? Here we go. Okay, so let's look, shall we, for a second at the Western Conference. Because it exists. Okay, so we don't talk about it enough. All right, so currently, I'm going to bring it up here for all of this sake because this will be fun. The standings are interesting because and they're the big win last night by the Oilers, obviously. Big win, huge 2 points against the Rangers. Because that was huge in keeping them.
Yeah, their whole season would be lost without that win.
It may have been, Russ. You might be right about that. So, all right, so let's go to the wild card race in the West. Here we go. I'm going to look at this carefully. Things fell off.
Chicago won too, so we got to talk about this. Their odds.
Right, we're going to talk about all this. So here we have, for those of you keeping track at home, the standings. Okay, so this is the wild card race right now. Dallas, 68 games played, 75 points. Down to Edmonton, 69 games played, 69 points. So that's 6 points for those of you who can't do math at home that separate these 6 teams. 2 of which are going to make the wild card. Basically, after that, when you go up above here, it actually is pretty unlikely that Dallas is going to catch St. Louis. Is possible, but the way St. Louis is playing, no. Otherwise, these 6 teams are pretty much set at the top.
The
so
Tarasenko injury brings it into
possible, right? Perspective.
Right.
Okay, so all right, so I thought, as I was doing this, I'm like that's really, as opposed to the Flyers who only have 1 team ahead of them, the Oilers have 1, 2, 3 teams ahead of them, and then they have to beat one of these. So 4 teams to get into the wild card. Very tough, right? Because all these teams are playing each other in different situations. You got 3-point games. We all know that way it works. Okay, but 6 points out with a game in hand on Minnesota. So think of it that way too. So they are actually, so from Minnesota, they're
5 points out with a game in hand. Yeah.
Right. Right. They are 5 points out with a game in hand, right? So that's a 3-point. So basically, you're looking at another 3-point situation. If the game in hand is
no. You can't assume the victory.
The game in hand for them is Tuesday against New Jersey in Edmonton. You would think that, if they don't win that, they don't belong in the playoffs, right? But they've got the Devils who have like 3 NHL players on them right now with all the injuries they have. So that should be a win. All right, but even if we don't assume that, even if we go far off the bat, I'm gonna stop this and just talk to you guys from now. My blog today kind of summed it up best, I think, because not just because it's mine, but the fact of the matter is, we love to talk about this. These websites that have things like percentages and Sports Club Stats, a good one, right? They're the one I think I've been doing this the longest with that kind of stuff. They're pretty solid. I have a story on them tomorrow coming up because I went back in the last 3 years and looked at who they had and the percentages they had of teams making the playoffs in the first week of March and who actually made it, who didn't. But right now, what they have, is they have Dallas, who we said there is in the first playoff spot, has an 86.5% chance of making the playoffs.
Right.
Minnesota, right after them, it drops down to 37.4.
Right, because they have less games. They only have 12.
Right. Dallas has 14 games to play, and they're ahead. So they are looking really good, right? Then Arizona with 38, Colorado with 30. Arizona actually has the second best chance of making the playoffs, scoring them because Arizona has 1 more game to play than Minnesota.
Right.
And then Colorado at 29, and then despite the fact that the next 2 teams are only 1 point behind Colorado, Chicago's at 4.8%.
They're 3 points behind Colorado.
3 points, right? With the game in hand, right? With the game in hand. So 3 points behind Colorado.
Right.
4.8% chance and a 5% chance for Chicago and Edmonton. Actually, Chicago is a longer shot to make the playoffs than Edmonton.
And the reason why is it's not like they're 5 points behind Minnesota and nobody's in between them. They're 5 points behind Minnesota with Colorado and Arizona between them. So that means that they need 3 teams to lose for them to gain.
Okay, well let's play this out a little bit longer, and if I'm done all this, you can tell me why I haven't proven this. One of the factors that this Sports Club Pro Stats website doesn't take into account, or whatever Sports Club Stats with Sports Club Stats does not take into account is how these teams are actually currently playing. How well are these teams playing? Okay, and you look over the last 10 games at those 6 teams, the best record of those 6 teams is
Edmonton.
Arizona.
Arizona's 8-2, right?
8-2 in the last 10. Edmonton 7-2-1.
Right.
Then Minnesota 6-2-2. Dallas 6-4. Colorado 5-4. 5-4-1. Okay, so that's what you have there over the last 10 games. Those numbers are good for Edmonton to keep playing that at that rate. That'd be incredibly difficult for them to do.
Have to play better than that.
No, they don't. They don't.
Yes, they do.
Why? No, they don't. No, if all the teams play at the same rate that they're playing right now for the rest of the season, just taking that into account. So that would be, Arizona's
playing 500 points percentage hockey.
No, they're not. Not in the last 10.
On the last
right.
10. But what they
In
do
the last 10, if they were to stay if they were to go in their last 11 games at the same rate,
but
seven.
if you take the last 10 of every team, that's not a predictor of what they're going to do for the next 10.
No,
Only
it's
Tampa
not.
Bay.
Right. No, it's not impossible that and Edmonton's schedule actually is easier in their next 10 than it was the last 10. And they're talking about their next 12. Okay. So if they were to stay at that rate, Arizona would make the play. Arizona would finish in the top wild card with 94 points. Dallas with 92. Edmonton just out at 89, which is still out of the playoffs. Okay. 3 points out of the playoffs. Minnesota at 87, Colorado at 84, Chicago at 85. That's if they continue playing like they played the last 10 for the rest of the way. So Edmonton would still miss by 3 points.
All right. Can I explain why Arizona is not going to make the playoffs?
Right. I can tell you why Arizona's not going to play us, but go ahead.
I'm going to tell you it's very simple. They are 17-5-3 at home, 17-15-3 at home, 17-15-2 on the road. They have not differentiated their home ice to anything, and at some point that will kill them. If they lose a couple of home games, that's what's going to hurt.
Right. That's a great point. I mean, 8-2 is an incredible record, but their last 12 games, I guess it is, or they have 13 games to play. There's a point thing I did for like the strength of schedule, and basically it goes from like 0 to 5. If you're the closer you get to 0, the harder your schedule is for the rest of the way. But it's basic. But just so you know,
just take this into consideration though. If Dallas plays 500 hockey, 7-7 in their last 14 games, they will end up with 80. They will end up with 89 points.
So Edmonton plays
for Edmonton to tie them, they have to go 10-3. That's why I'm saying the odds, the percentages are right. The percentages
but they just went 7-2-1. So 10-3 is not impossible. It's not a 5% chance. It's like it's not.
They've gone 9-3 with all the pressure off of them.
Dallas is going to make the playoffs. Okay, I agree with you.
Let me just make the point. They've gone 9-3 after making the deal for Sam Gagner and doing nothing at the deadline, and the focus of almost everyone has been off of the Oilers. And as soon as that happened, they won 4 games in a row. Then they got their butt handed to them by Toronto. Then they won a few more games. Then they lost to Toronto again. They've done it with mostly no eyes on them. Now, all of a sudden, they're 5 points out of a playoff spot, and everybody's going to say, well, they got a outside chance of making the playoffs. Yeah, this team has proven that they choke under the pressure. They do have good players. They do have McDavid. They do have Draisaitl. They don't have anything else other than those players. That's the whole point. This is not a good team.
The chances of them doing anything in the playoffs is rare. Okay, getting to the playoffs is not impossible at all, and it's not. It's not
impossible. We agree with you on that, but it's not
impossible.
The 5% thing of that. This is the other thing that people probably don't know. I went through their record against these teams that they're playing the rest of the way. So if you were to take how they played against those teams the last 2 years and the last 4 years, I did both of those. In the last 2 years, they've got a .690 winning percentage against the teams they're playing the rest of the way. The Oilers do .690. I mean, so these are teams, and the Blues are in there, but they've dominated the Blues. And now you can say the Blues, but the Blues are
dominated Jordan Binnington. That's different.
But the Blues are also at the very end of the season, when the Blues may not have anything to play for, or they might have something.
They're only 4 points ahead of Dallas.
Right. Right now they are
out of the woods.
Right now they are, but it could. I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but all I'm sitting back and saying is that what I'm trying to prove here is the concept of these percentages is insane, because it's really. I mean, there are so many other things that can happen, and there aren't incredible long shots for them to happen.
Well, like I said, I mean, the reason
it's how you're weighting those long shots, right? So when you're deriving a model, you're going to put a weighting of the importance of each event. That's how you would do it. So
Correct.
If there's a long shot and the percentages say it's a 5.2%, but really we look at it and says the math isn't there, you're weighting that there's some other probabilities that are likely to happen versus the ones that aren't. And you're going to have a weight of what that means in there. That's that's one way it should be done.
Yeah.
I've got to figure it out, so you guys don't have to worry about it anymore.
Go ahead, Tom.
So Minnesota's going to drop.
Okay.
They're going to miss the playoffs. And Arizona's going to squeak in with 87 points. Okay. And then it's going to go. So they're going to swap. Colorado's going to finish with 85. Chicago with 82. Vancouver is actually going to finish with 77, Anaheim 65, and LA is going to finish with 75. Sorry for Anaheim, and LA is going to finish with 69.
Where did you have Edmonton?
Where's Edmonton?
Oh, Edmonton. Whoops, I missed Edmonton. Sorry. 13.
It's easy to miss them.
They're going to finish with 82, right behind Chicago. So it's the only two that could flip are Chicago and Edmonton.
Right.
So Edmonton could finish ahead of Chicago, but they might finish underneath.
So you're saying 82. My projector has them finishing with 94 points. All right. So.
Oh my God.
All right.
I'm
going to tell you this. My projector is way off. Okay. Because what my projector does is it just bases on what should happen, but the Oilers aren't going to win every game they should win the rest of the way. Okay.
That means they're going 12-0-1 in the last 13 games.
They're going to get beaten, like I said, but based on every individual event, like you're talking about, Peter, they've got winning records against these teams. They've got those teams on some of those better teams on back-to-back on the ends of back-to-backs after they've got rest. There's all kinds of crazy crap that's going on that go the Oilers' way here.
I do want to point out the Oilers' record against Jordan Binnington is 0-0.
Right? No, I know. And if Binnington doesn't play that game because they're going to rest Binnington.
Did Keith Gretzky all of a sudden find the secret to reincarnate Rocket Richard? Because that's the only way that friggin' team is going 12-0-1. I mean, it's
right.
come on.
Peter, what would you give me? Would you cut in the middle there? Would you say that? Well, you would make a bet with me that they finished more than 88 or 86?
Who, me?
Yeah, I say that the Oilers finished more than 80. Let's come right in the middle. I say that 87 or higher.
You say 87 or higher?
Nope.
Yeah.
That means they've got to earn. Oh my God, they're only at 69 points. They've got to earn 18 points. Yeah, I'll take that bet.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll take it too.
I'll take it too.
All right, we're gonna see where they finish. Remember that number, 87, guys.
They're
87.
toast.
No, I'm not. Again,
Again, this is how bad the Edmonton Oilers are. They trade for Sam Gagner, who was relegated to the AHL, loaned out to the Toronto Marlies, and he's a talented player. I think because his $3 million salary was something that it just wasn't working for them in Vancouver. They make the trade for Ryan Spooner. His first game, he's put on the line with friggin' McDavid. That's how bad this team is.
that was a brilliant move by Hitchcock, and I'll tell you why. Because and I think Russ will agree with that one. That Gagner, we've seen Gagner play. Gagner is way better with talented players around him.
He is. That is true.
And Gagner has this. There are very few players that can play, that have the actual mental and then physical ability to play with.
But you misunderstand what I'm saying. This is not an attack on Sam Gagner because I think Sam Gagner is an NHLer. This is an attack on the Edmonton Oilers for the fact that a guy who was relegated to the AHL for most of the season was one of their best options to put on the top line. When you're putting Zach Kassian and Jujhar Khaira in your top six, you are a pathetic organization.
This will be called the miracle at the mall, but the chat room's confused. Like, we need to move on.
Yeah, please.
I just want to say one thing about the Oilers. Of their remaining 13 games, 9 of them are against a team either ahead of them or in the playoffs.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
Easy money.
I know. No, all right, easy money. Go ahead. Go. But look at the Oilers. Look at the Oilers historically against those particular teams. It's crazy. And we're talking about like the last 2 and 4 years when the Oilers haven't been great teams. Anyway, the last thing I'll say about this, the point of this exercise is to talk about these percentages and how you have to actually play out these games to get an actual projected. You can't just look at percentages and say they're not going to make it. That's too easy. That's too obvious.
Yeah, and in fairness to you, I will say this. Back in the 90s, I used to go down to Vegas a fair bit as a quick flight from Vancouver, and we go down for lots of music things and stuff. And one of the things we realized really fast was that the bookies in Vegas didn't really understand a couple nuances of hockey in terms of things like back-to-back starts, backup goalies on back-to-back games, things like that. And they weren't seeing that. And so you can make really good bets and make some pretty easy money fast if you knew what the team was and you were sort of willing to put it down. And it wasn't that hard, and they got wise. So I think there's an element to what you're saying that is definitely there's some truth in it and some probability that you got to consider a certain event thing, because if all of a sudden your goalie goes down, or next thing you know, your goalie gets hot, and you're starting it the right way, it's going to have an effect on what you're betting odds on a game by game basis. I just think it's really hard to project out without using a long-term trend of the team, because they all average to what they are.
Yeah, no, it is. But and the last thing I'll say is this about this percentages and your total, and I appreciate that, Peter, because somebody has to agree with something I say today. All right. The last thing I'll say is this: the Flyers right now, according to Pro Sports Stats, are a 7.6% chance to make the playoffs. The Blue Jackets and the Montreal Canadiens, respectively, are 56.3 and 44.9%.
Right.
They are 3 points ahead of the Flyers right now, and have been playing terrible hockey. And the Flyers are the best team in the second half, and they have 12 games left. And you're telling me the Flyers can't make up 3 points on two teams that are playing terrible hockey?
Well, you're saying terrible hockey. They're 5-5.
Right.
That's not terrible hockey. That's
Still,
average NHL hockey.
No.
Right.
All right, they're 5-5.
What they're using,
They're only making up 3 points, and the Flyers play. I think they play Columbus and Montreal. I'm not sure. I got to remember that.
Next game, I looked this up. Next game, they play Washington.
Yep.
Washington has only lost.
Washington's going to kill them.
Washington is 9-1 in their last 10, and they've only lost 12 games all year on the road.
Yeah, Washington's crazy good right now.
Okay, so if Washington, so they lose that game. Now you're one less game off the docket. You don't know who else is going to win that night. They could be 5 points out again. You get what's happening here? It's like they're going to take 1 step forward and 2 steps back. That's where
they only have to take 2 steps forward while one of those other teams takes 2 steps back. And suddenly
nobody's taking 2 back. They're at 500. Both
Columbus
of them.
and Montreal have taken steps back a ton here. I just don't agree. I think it's possible. I really, and I'm not saying, I don't even think it benefits the Flyers to make the playoffs. And I'm going to sound like Mike here for a second, but I don't think, because
finally some good sense.
I honestly don't think that anybody of these wild cards in either conference has a shot at any of these top teams. Like, I think there's a huge difference. There's a huge difference this year. I think Washington and Tampa are by far the best teams in the East. I don't even think it's close. And I think those two teams, I don't think anyone else can play with those two teams.
I think you could put Boston into that category.
Yeah. Hold on, though. Here are the classic bad signs that are really being sort of overlooked with the Flyers. They fall behind every game. Last night they fell behind. Now they are playing Ottawa, right? So then they score the next 3, and you think the game's in hand, and then Ottawa gets another goal with like a minute and change left, and then all of a sudden anything can happen. You play a better team than that, you're losing most of those games, and they've been playing that way all year long.
Yeah, but they've also I agree with you completely.
And Carter is playing left wing, and they've got a 4th line defenseman in there every game now. Like, teams are going to figure out this 7th defenseman thing, and when they do, it's going to look ugly for the Flyers.
But they've also done it without Carter Hart, who turned their season around, right? They've done it lately. Lately, they've done it without him, which is pretty crazy. And obviously, a lot of people were mad that Elliott was playing last night, but I think the idea was you got to go with Talbot against Washington and not Elliott, right? If you end up back against,
I don't know if they're doing that though.
Hart might be playing against Washington, I heard, but I don't know.
No. He's not playing against Washington. I would be shocked.
He's the backup last night, so why wouldn't he be?
I thought Gordon said he had to have a certain amount of practices. What will he have? 2 practices by then?
Then my bet is 100. I would bet 100% that Talbot's the goalie, and then in that game because
I wouldn't put him in against Washington. No way.
You wouldn't play Talbot?
No. Talbot, I would play. I would not put Hart in.
No, I wouldn't put Hart in either. I was hoping they would put him in last night. That would be the perfect chance to put him in. But
I look at the setup in the East, and I think there's no way that Philadelphia is catching either Carolina or Pittsburgh at 83 points.
No, they're not catching either one of them.
They're not going to get into the top 3.
So they're gone. So it's 3 teams and 1 makes it. And Columbus and Montreal are 79 and Philadelphia's at 76 with the same amount of games played. Now I believe they play Montreal, but I don't think they play Columbus again. I think they're done with Columbus. Head to head is always the random element. If you can beat that team, you gain 2 points on them in regulation, and they don't gain anything. So, but if they don't face Columbus, then, and I'm pretty sure they don't, I mean, that it's going to be, really, that's the thing. They have 1 game left against the 2 teams that they're chasing. And that's tough. I mean, that's really tough to you're going to be watching the scoreboard and hope. And I think I'm pretty sure Columbus and Montreal play each other. And if they do that, then a 3-point game screws Philadelphia both ways.
3-point games can definitely screw. I mean, I'm listen again. The idea of this
in front of Philly, and that's including the Islanders, has a losing record in their last 10. What makes us think they're going to have a losing record in the next 10?
Yeah, no, listen, I'm not saying that they're probably making the playoffs.
Although it's not.
We'll move on, but I'm not saying they're probably making the playoffs. I'm just saying people who say that they are definitely not making the playoffs are out of their minds. And the Blue Jackets are in trouble. Like watching that game last night. Let's transition.
Hello, folks.
That game, okay?
Trouble scoring goals. There's no question.
They're having a lot of trouble scoring goals. And who do they play tonight but Boston? Okay, so they've got Boston tonight. Montreal has Detroit tonight. So Montreal, in this race, Montreal picks up 2 points tonight probably. But Boston and Columbus, it's a tough one, right, for Columbus.
Well,
really.
if Columbus falls out of Montreal replaces them, Philly still doesn't get in.
Right. If Columbus,
I know, but Montreal,
Columbus wins,
yes,
and Montreal wins, then your percentage is going to go down significantly. It'll probably be under 5% tomorrow.
You know what? What's great though is like I want to know what the NHL schedule makers use to weight this stuff, because they are fascinatingly accurate in making key matchups happen. Like look at Montreal's matches to finish the season in April.
And they have a math genius locked up in the back that we never see. We don't
home at Tampa Bay, then to Washington, then back home against the Leafs to finish it.
That's a horrible ending.
I mean, it's crazy.
But the thing is, though, I mean, even though I think most Leaf fans, if there was an opportunity to eliminate Montreal in the final game of the season, they would want them to play every good guy on their team and not rest anybody and screw the Hab fans in Montreal, make them suffer. But Babcock will play Garrett Sparks, and he'll sit people because
he will.
That game is meaningless to them. So that again,
they also have to play Winnipeg. They have to play Carolina. They've got to play Columbus. I mean, the Montreal schedule is brutal.
Now, let me just say something about the one game last night, because we basically talked about all the games with playoff ramifications, with the Islanders beating Columbus, and
that was huge. That's the game let's touch on that one, because that's a good one.
Okay, but let me just touch on the Leaf Lightning game quickly. One, I love that announcers will make all these excuses. Oh, they've just come back from the Western Road swing. Oh, there was a time change. It was spring ahead, so they lost an hour of sleep. The only valid excuse I would say is that there was a lot of illness going on in the Leaf locker room. One guy, Zach Hyman, was probably not supposed to play but did and played less minutes. Kasperi Kapanen was sick, and they basically sat him because they didn't want him to get everybody else sick. And the team looked terrible. They came back and the Lightning stomped them. It was 6-2.
Yeah. They can make people look.
It's clear to me though is that the Leafs right now, they've gone 0-2 against the Islanders, which were games that people looked as statement games with the Tavares thing going to Toronto. They went 1-3 against Boston, and now they've gone 1-2. They got one more game to go against Tampa. They're not as good. They may be as good as the Islanders, because I don't think the Islanders are as good as they're playing right now. I think they're a creation of the Barry Trotz defensive system, but they're not as good as Boston, and they're not as good as Tampa. And I wrote something this morning and said, the fallacy that the Leafs were the leading contender for the Stanley Cup after they signed Tavares, and leading contender odds wise for the Stanley Cup at the beginning of the year because they were hot, is proof that these odds people in that instance didn't know what the hell they were talking about, because until this team improves their defense, they're not going friggin' anywhere. Yeah. Nowhere.
It was a good vote of confidence, Mike, that you put up a picture of the Hindenburg yesterday. That was good.
I said that they looked dazed and confused, and I had to use the album cover from Led Zeppelin 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You're
but if I go back to like a month ago, Mike, he knew that they were going to be slogging through this part of the season because they had nothing to play for. So we don't really know what they are
except home ice advantage.
Right. But we don't really know what they are until the playoff bell rings, too. We have to be clear about that.
It's and that's the thing. It's very possible they could step up against the Bruins. But right now, the way that they have slugged around, good for a couple games and bad for a few, and how consistent Boston has been without Pasternak in their lineup. If most people are going to say, I think it's like probably an 80-20 proposition that the Bruins are going to beat the Leafs in the first round. Now, it's not impossible if Tavares plays well, if Matthews shows up, if they get great goaltending out of Freddie Anderson, sure. Yeah. But more than likely, I mean, the way it's gone a couple times before in the last 5 years is probably the way it's going to go. I mean, people in Toronto are starting to get prepared for it because it just seems inevitable. Now, we hope that they can put together a good series against the Bruins, and the Bruins aren't like unbeatable. But right now, I think the trend is that the Bruins are heavily favored going into that first round match. Now, the other thing is, and thankfully,
they're not heavily favored by Brad Marchand. Because Brad Marchand's a big fan of Mitch Marner.
Yes,
he thinks he's like the best player.
He wants Mitch Marner to have a great contract.
Yes, he does. And I would like to sit underneath. I would like to sit underneath Brad Marchand's nose because there's a lot of shade under there.
Oh, that's great. I love it. It's hilarious.
But thankfully the NHL wheels turned very quickly last night after the video came out, and this is the thing. The video came out during the game about that people thought Morgan Riley had said something, a slur to the official, and it didn't really add up because first of all, when I listened to it, it was sort of distant. You couldn't really make it out. And then hearing the audio boosted this morning, it sounded like two people saying two different things. So thankfully, after a sort of a crap storm after the game last night, where the NHL was investigating and the Leafs were, working with them to make sure things went the right way, the Colin Campbell came out this afternoon and said there was no evidence that Morgan Riley said what people thought he said. And Kyle Dubas and Riley had a press conference this afternoon in Toronto. And, I did not think it was, I mean, if he had said it, I think he probably would have been suspended, and the league is very sensitive about that with the you can play initiative. And I understand that, but I didn't, it wasn't in his character to say that. So I'm glad it got cleared up.
Me too. It definitely wasn't in his character, and I hate that kind of stuff. And really, it's not. There aren't many.
Way too quick. They didn't even wait for anything to come out on it.
Of course not. This is the internet days. We're in the internet days. Everything's just people panic. People think and they assume the worst all the time. So
it's funny because if you watch the HBO show The Newsroom, how Aaron Sorkin railed against Twitter and social media making decisions and judgments, and this is the perfect illustration of that, because they jump to the conclusion Morgan Riley, he's dead to me now because he said this, and okay, well, he didn't say it, so is he undead to you now?
Here's the funny thing about Twitter to me, hockey Twitter in general. It really is these kind of people who are on Twitter, hockey Twitter, they've always existed. You know this, right? This is not new.
No, absolutely. Now you just hear it.
They just have a place you can hear it, right? So, but if you were younger, and right after you get invited to a party with friends, and you went where those people were at, just it would be it's ridiculous. I'm not gonna, it's so to me, that's hockey Twitter to me is a lot like that.
I think there's good aspects to hockey Twitter.
Of course, there's always good.
It's a community.
There's good people out there, but what you have to realize is that the internet magnifies the extremes on both sides all the time.
Sure.
I mean, politics shows this more than anything else, but it exists everywhere, right? So the extremes on the middle, where 99% of people are, those people don't, you never call up a company and say, I love how well my vacuum cleaner is working. You never do that. You would never I got an oven upstairs. I told you guys about it. I love it. I actually sent emails to them, and I felt weird sending emails saying your oven is amazing. It's just but you never see that. You just never see a person do that, because people on the internet are people that are generally inspired by anger, and they want to complain about something, and they want to be heard. and that you don't want to be heard when you have good news. So
the internet is basically a crime of passion in
Yeah.
text form is what it is. There's no logical reason for 98% of all the stuff that's being said there. It's just a passionate
Yeah.
outburst. So instead of, it's like the trolls, the hate, the whatever, it's all based on passion, right? There's no rhyme or reason. You're just pissed off a tweet.
Absolutely. No, that's exactly it. It's instantaneous. But let's talk about the Islanders for a second. That was an enormous win for the Islanders. Just like and beyond like anything. I mean, this is beyond like it was season saving win for the Islanders in a lot of ways. Like if they lose that game last night to Columbus, who knows? I mean, they really could have fallen out of the playoffs. They could have really collapsed because they've been heading in that trajectory for a while now, and they needed to. And Columbus with all the pressure on them to shut out Columbus. To get a big game out of Greiss like they got. Even though we all know Robin Leonard's the better goalie. But to get that game out of Greiss is enormous and absolutely phenomenal. Just Barry Trotz type win. Cause it's hard to. I know I repeat this a lot, but being such a fan of the Predators, and I watch all the Predators games all the time. And since they've been in the league, and I've seen Barry Trotz teams, and I knew that was the kind of game. If I could have if someone had pulled me over and said, "What's going to happen in that game?" I would have said they're going to shut them out and win 2 or 3-0. Like that's a total Barry Trotz type game where your team's falling apart and you just shut it down. That's something that is impressive, and that it also shows the Islanders have probably more than people think going into the playoffs that they will have. Because a lot of people think they could be an easy go in the playoffs because they're over.
The other side of the coin. I mean, Columbus had the puck most of the night. They just didn't get goals, and that's Tortorella hockey, right? You cycle, you hold on to the puck.
Yeah.
At some point, that's probably going to start working for him again. I don't think it just falls off the map and stays off the map. Boston have a shutout tonight, and then we're not even discussing Columbus for another couple of games.
No, you're right. You're right about that. But Columbus obviously Columbus is in desperation mode tonight.
Sure.
They've got Boston. They're at home, I think. Yeah, they're at home. My projector has them getting a point out of this one. This has Boston winning in overtime. So that's what the predictions are, which would be good for them. If they at least have to get a point out of tonight. They definitely need that. Obviously 2 points would be better, but if they can get 1 point out tonight. The other big games tonight are Montreal, Detroit. We talked about that.
Well, Pittsburgh, Washington's the game that I think everybody
that'll be the game. That's like the high profile game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's
Jets Sharks will be good too. I think.
Oh yeah, no, that's actually the better game. I mean, the Jets Sharks. That's the game of the night to me.
Well, I mean, it'll be good, but I'm just going to count the minutes until Tom Wilson does something stupid.
Yeah.
Well, then there's that.
And then you have St. Louis, Arizona too. Like with Arizona, like we talk about, they're playing really well right now. This is a bit, if Arizona can.
I was gonna bring that up because Arizona's coming off the 7-1 loss to the Hawks, and we talked about that deal when it was made and said, okay, this is an opportunity for the Blackhawks to get a couple players who didn't work out in Arizona, and we've talked about Dylan Strome and how well Strome has done. Well, Brandon Perlini had a hat trick against his old team. If Perlini gets on a roll and he starts playing like a lot of people thought he was going to when he came out of the OHL, then Stan Bowman should be arrested for highway robbery on that.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, no, that's really true.
Now I wanted to mention this because these things are starting to come out, and I know Russ wrote something that he posted on Sportsology. I think it was last week, Russ, about some of these college free agents.
Yeah,
and we've had a couple. Elliot Friedman just tweeted out a little.
Oh no, it was it was Elite Prospects.
Elite Prospects. Thank you. I'm sorry. But Elliot Friedman just tweeted out about 20 minutes ago that there's a few names that were brought up: Josh Tevis and Max Verano from Princeton. Verano is an Ottawa native, and he's apparently going to go to the Senators. Tevis is from Calgary. He's signing with Vancouver. And the Leafs signed a defenseman from Mercyhurst named Joseph Duszak, who a lot of people seem to be high on, Russ. I mean,
Duszak can skate. I mean, I think he can get even better as a skater. He's a good puck handler, really good passer. I think Dusak's got something there. Tevis is an interesting one because he's all offense. He can do puck retrieval, and that's going to be have to be the kind of defenseman he is. He has really good offensive skills. They even used him as a winger one day this year. I've watched him for the last 3 or 4 years. He's gotten better every year. I still don't know if he's more than a bottom pairing defenseman, if he even makes it. So I think it's more of a long shot for Tevis because defense isn't his strong suit. And while the offense is good, he's still going to have to do the puck retrieval. He can do it. We'll see. We'll see how that one works out. But there is good speed and offense in his game. Verano is going to be a perfect fit in Ottawa. That's what I wrote for Elite Prospects. I think they should sign Kuffner too, Ottawa. I wrote that too about a week ago. Verano is the kind of guy, now he's played there 4 years. He's got really good speed. He is the one that made that whole line work. They had a line together basically for 4 years with Kuffner, Verano, and Alex Ritchie. And Verano, over the years, even became a better goal scorer because he started shooting the puck more and just in all situations, like basically just firing it on the net. But he plays in all situations. He's a really good puck handler, really good speed. Mm-hmm. There's a lot there. Like, he's a guy that probably after a good summer would have a really good chance of playing on Ottawa next year. And that's a really good low-cost signing. Right. That's why I think they should get Kuffner too. You got 2/3 of a line. That could be some great chemistry for the Senators, but I don't know if they'll do that.
And the funny thing is, over the last few years, we've noticed with VC and Butcher, and going back a few years to Tyler Bozak, that this is a free shot. It's all it costs you is an NHL contract. You invest in a college free agent, and if he turns out, you're way ahead in the game. And Peter, the funny thing is, I think teams like Winnipeg and Toronto can really benefit from these college free agents simply because they're good organizations, they're deep organizations, but they have weaknesses. Winnipeg on the left side of the blue line, the Leafs on the right side of the blue line. Duszak is a right-hand shot defenseman, and he probably sees, other than Timothy Liljegren, the pipeline very barren on the right side with Toronto, and probably says, I have a good year in the AHL. I'm in the NHL in 2 years.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that Kevin Cheveldayoff is probably trolling, looking for left-hand shot defensemen because they could be in the NHL in a year or two when it comes to the Jets.
I do want to mention one more thing because the article that I wrote was a fun article because it was basically who gets signed first, Kuffner or Verano, and I said it would be Verano, so I actually was right on that. So that's pretty good too. Like, I actually guessed that one.
The college free agent thing is such a funny thing, like in this situation, because one, you now sort of have a little bit of a body of evidence to work with, unlike junior guys who are overage, right? Because these guys are men playing in essentially a men's league, as opposed to a 19-year-old junior who's been bypassed by the draft and has just been playing junior. It's a different world for them.
Yeah.
And so you get this chance. And so to your point, Mike, you got to look at that and say, well, now I've been playing like this. I have a shot to go and have a better path in, but also what kind of organization is developing players? Well, the Leafs are developing players. They're putting huge resources into player development. You're just continuing what's the best fit for you. And that's why they becomes attractive and stuff. And I think there's a lot of benefit to teams to further that out, but a lot of teams like the Leafs and even the Canucks to a certain degree who are able to sign someone is to get in and get a point where you have a route to the NHL and you're being supported on that route. You're not left to wither in the wind, right? That's the biggest thing.
I'll give you a good example, Peter. So with Vancouver, you have Adam Gaudette who won the Hobey Baker, right? He's 22. So that's a big advantage when a guy comes in at 22, because when you come in from college, you've already been working out, you're stronger, you've got the man strength already, you've been going to class, you're living on your own. So a lot of those things you have battled already. He's 11 points in 14 games for Utica. That's really good. Like, that shows that Adam Gaudette probably plays in the NHL next year.
Yeah, and the other thing, and we sort of understated during the summer, are some of the European free agents that are signed. And I know, like in Toronto, like people were saying, well, Nikita Zaitsev, they sign him to the long-term contract, and that's not a good value. Or they bring in Orgman or Rosen or Ozaganov, and they're not top four defensemen. Well, the thing is like there is value in bringing in a bottom pairing guy. if you didn't have these guys ready to step in, you're either playing a complete nothing like a Martin Marincin 15 minutes a night, or you're rushing a young kid up from the American Hockey League who's probably not ready for the NHL. There is value in having these guys develop and having them available to play games, instead of other players in your organization. So, I mean, like if the Leafs and other teams dip into the KHL and the SHL over the summer, and these guys get a chance. I mean, hey, Par Lindholm, he's not, he was an SHL guy. He came over, he played okay for the Leafs. Now he's playing for the Jets. There is value in those players. So I don't think that, anyway, so.
I agree.
We're going to see more college signings, but not all of them are going to make it.
No.
I only know these Princeton guys because, again, I cover Princeton more than any other college team, and I've watched them for 4 years. So that's the only reason I have a little better read on these guys than some of the others.
Yeah, no, that's good. You're the man. I appreciate it. That's awesome. Awesome stuff. What else do we have, guys? What else
you want to take a question or two from the chat?
Yeah, let's take a question from the chat. That's a good idea.
Okay, let's see what they got.
We might have some YouTube questions too. Let me see if I can grab some of those too.
Okay.
Some YouTube comments.
Usually those questions are more and more complaints about the fact that our pre-show is too long.
Yeah.
Like somebody said 15 minutes. What the bleep? And like, sorry.
That was somebody the other night though. It was like, I love the pre-shows. Pre-shows are great. So it varies.
It does.
Again, no one calls it back.
Yeah, you need something to work with here.
Yeah. I'm looking to see what we have here in the chat as far as some questions here.
I know. I'm trying to find
another sad wrestling death. Russ, the Mass Destroyer died.
I don't know if I know him.
Oh, he was in the WWF for a while. Like he was like NWA and WW. That was his name. The Mass. Let
me look him up. I don't know if I remember him.
Yeah, he's from Buffalo. That's why he died a few days ago. I
do remember him. He was really a jobber, though. He wasn't very good.
Right. No, he was like Johnny Rods or Jose Estrada. Yeah, those are the guys. Like if you watched wrestling and you know who Johnny Rods is, or Jim Williams, like these guys. These guys who wore like a singlet.
Yeah.
And they never won a match. They were always on the Saturday night. They were the sacrificial lamb to Jimmy Superfly Snuka or Roddy Piper.
True. All right. No, actually, you know what? I didn't wait. Hold on. All right. So who do we have in the final four? For Scott C is asking us. So I guess for the NHL, we're gonna have to wait on that one. Scott.
Oh yeah, no, we're gonna have a prediction show. But the only thing I'll say is Tampa is probably guaranteed.
Well, you can do it as of now. Like as of now, I mean, and then this can definitely change because I think we have a lot to go there for sure. But we'll get into the playoffs. But as of now, like I said, I don't think anyone's beaten Tampa or Washington, so I'm going with those two. In the,
I think Boston has a chance, but I would lean towards
a shot. But I don't think they're gonna get. I mean, I'm not convinced that they're gonna get past Toronto.
Wow. Okay.
I know you talked about
mouth to God's ear.
No, I'm just, and the reason I say that is because and then who knows the way the playoffs work, they're just all about momentum, so it's such a tricky thing. Like if Toronto has a really great series and can come out and can beat Boston, then who knows, maybe they have a shot at Tampa, but it doesn't.
I mean, like I said, I won't complain, but right now I don't see it because the Leafs are sort of wallowing and they have injury problems and. The well-oiled machine. But
yesterday, Mark Alicius, it was a really good reader. He reads a lot, or no, I mean, watcher of the podcast. He comments a lot. We really appreciate that. He's a Kings fan. You guys should talk about how good Grundstrom has been for the Kings. Thank you, Lise. We got a solid 1-2 goals in his first 2 games. Some comparing him to a Hornquist here in LA.
He's not going to score 82 goals, but I've always liked Carl Grundstrom from the time that he was drafted in the second round by the Leafs. They called him the Swedish Leo Komarov when they drafted him. He's feisty. He goes to the front of the net. He is not a particularly big player, but he will withstand the abuse from defensemen in front of the net. And like his first NHL goal was basically standing almost in the crease. I think he's a 15 to 20 goal scorer. I mean, right now it looks like he's scoring at a more, ridiculous pace.
I think Hornquist is a good comparison, though.
Hornquist is a little better, I think, because
What I always said was Thomas Holmstrom. I think he could stand in front of the net in the power play and get goals and take abuse. I don't know if he is going to be as good as Hornquist. Hornquist, is a 20 plus, 25 to almost close to 30.
Yeah, no,
but he's a really good young player, and the only reason the Leafs traded him, not that they didn't like him, they have so many wingers that they had to pay the price to get the defenseman. Now they just need another one.
I do want to say this, Zach. Someone in the chat room did say, "Hey, how come nobody has Rod Brindamore for the Jack Adams?" And then they were asking about Scott Gordon. The midseason awards, just so you know, for the Jack Adams was Trotz, Peters, and Cooper. Right now, Scott Gordon has no chance. Even if the Flyers made the playoffs, he has no chance. It's a small sample size. They brought up a great goalie. He's not going to win the award. It's just the way it is. If you think it's unfair, then I'm just saying that's how the voting is going to go. But right now, Rod Brindamore would be my number one.
And the guy who probably deserves votes, but we won't know how many votes he gets until they get the final standings, is Rick Tocchet. Yeah, I don't know how the hell the Coyotes are in this race with all the injuries that they have, especially in goal. But they're with.
I'm going to give it to Brindamore because if you had told me at the beginning of the year that the goaltending would go the way it's gone for them and they're in the playoffs, I probably wouldn't have agreed with you.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I got to go, guys, but I want to answer two real quick questions, okay? First of all, Cameron Young in the he wanted to know what we have against Bigfoot and Squat and Nessie. I just want to say that I'm wearing my Bigfoot thing today. Keep it squatchy.
There's Nessie.
Nothing against these fake things.
In honor of him, Bigfoot's real, but that's okay. We won't talk about that today. All right,
I prefer the Abominable Snowman.
Right. And then the other thing is Too Dope wants to know why I don't have a Saskatoon Blades jersey. Send me one. I'll put one back there in a second. I'd love that. I'd love that. I was looking into like an Indianapolis Racers jersey. I just try to find. I basically look for cheap jerseys unless they're given to me.
Saskatoon Blades is a great franchise.
It's an awesome.
The St. Louis Blues jersey is one of the new ones.
Yeah. Today, no, that was new yesterday. Today, the newest one, the Tavares one over there. Hung up over there, and then behind
that's not new because you were wearing it yesterday, so that's not new.
But then next to the Ottawa's jersey there, I don't know if you can see it or not, is the
Rimouski one. Is the Rimouski new?
North Dakota Zach Parise jersey that's right next to him. Rimouski is the other direction. Yeah, that's Rimouski the other way.
Yeah, Rimouski is new. I thought so. Yeah,
that's not new, but that's
a Freddie Gauthier jersey or a Sidney Crosby jersey.
There you go. Yeah, it is a Sidney Crosby jersey, the Rimouski jersey. All right. Remember, guys, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you tomorrow.